they require to make good on what it is they have committed to, and as best as possible to work those two legislations in lockstep in order to give confidence to both sides who have concerns when it comes to good faith, or rather the absence of it.
Well, can I thank the honourable gentleman for what he said, and I hope he will know that I will do anything and everything I can to try and find a way forward in partnership with as many members of the House as possible, because this question has for a long period of time been subject to the bipartisanship that is in the main characterised relations between the parties in the House on matters to do with Northern Ireland. I recognise that there are disagreements in relation to one aspect of what we are putting forward. Doesn't mean we can't work together on the others. I do take his point about the importance of seeing the legislation that is required in Ireland in order to give effect to this, and I was standing next to the Taoiseach when he made it quite clear, to give an example, that the commitment to enable witnesses to give evidence to the Omagh public inquiry, he said we will legislate to deal with that so that it's in place before the hearings resume in March, and that seems to me to be a very important example of good faith.
Colm Eastwood.
I suppose the Secretary of State will forgive some of us for being cautious before we are ready to believe that the government will, and the state and any paramilitary organisation will give over the information that's required. In fact, right now there are families across the road in the Supreme Court in legal dispute with the government because the government is withholding information from them. We know there's a pattern in this. When it comes to inquests, will he look again at the sifting process, and will he put family views, and will we give family views primacy when it comes to deciding which cases will have an inquest? And will he drop his proposal? Will he drop his proposal to give himself the power to appoint judges in that inquisitorial mechanism? Because a very important principle of the independence of the judiciary needs to be held up.
Well, on the subject of inquests, there will be 3 statutory tests that the Solicitor General will have to apply. And I've just indicated in answer to an earlier question what they are. Family views will be one of the considerations. But if inquests can't proceed because of sensitive information, well, wouldn't it be more sensible to put it into the Commission, which can deal with sensitive information because it has provision for closed hearings? No doubt my honourable friend will make the point about appointment processes when we come to discuss the bill. I would, however, just point out, and it's also relevant to the point that's been made from the opposition benches, the agreement on the information retrieval mechanism. This was something that the previous Conservative government negotiated with the Irish government and formed part of the Stormont House Agreement. What is the purpose of it? The purpose of it is to enable those who have information to pass it to the body, which can then pass it to the families, and that information will be a protected disclosure, which is not the same as immunity. It will be a protected disclosure. That system has worked very well in recovering quite a number of the remains of those who were abducted, tortured, murdered and buried by the IRA through the ICLVR, and I hope that that is a step forward in going back to what was agreed at Stormont House by the last government, and the Irish government and the political parties, well, not all of them, will be welcome on all sides.
Saoirse Eastwood.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Secretary of State, you refer to this as unfinished business, and in the last statement we heard about the successes of the peace process in Northern Ireland. I was 12 years old when the Good Friday Agreement was signed. I now stand here 40 years of age as the MP for Lagan Valley, and my constituents deserve truth and justice as much as anybody else. We've heard a lot today about veterans, and my family were part of that cohort, and they proudly served, along with many others. They do not want an amnesty. They do not want immunity. They do not want equivocation with terrorists, which was proposed by the outgoing government. We hear about people in Northern Ireland that were in the wrong place at the wrong time whenever they died. They were not. It was the terrorists that we're in the wrong place, doing the wrong work. We must send out a clear signal, no matter what our political opinion, that terrorism was wrong in the past and it is wrong now. Can you give me your guarantee that you will discuss this with the Northern Ireland Executive and my ministerial colleagues to make sure that those families who so rightfully deserve truth and justice actually have the resource to be able to get it?
Well, may I say to the honourable member, I agree with every single word that she expressed so powerfully and so forcefully, and I would encourage those who've been chuntering from a sedentary position during the course of these exchanges to reflect on the point that you made about there are many people who say we don't want immunity. We don't want immunity, and we certainly object to it being given to those who committed the most appalling crimes. And voices in Northern Ireland really do need to be listened to, which is why it's the failure to do that, including in the last Legacy Act, why I made the point that there's a terrible lack of trust on the part of politicians over a long period of time. I'm not going to make a party point. There is a terrible lack of trust in politicians because they've seen attempts before and they haven't worked. We've got to try and make this work, and I've already begun the process of talking to her colleagues in the Northern Ireland Executive.
Joe White.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Following my colleague's last question, I'd like to say that the Tories' immunity system would have meant immunity for the perpetrators of terrorist crimes across the UK. And our domestic courts have determined this. Does the Minister agree that this government has no choice but to rectify the situation?
Well, I agree with my honourable friend. She makes the point extremely forcefully. It didn't work. It was never deliverable. There never was immunity. It was a false promise made to veterans who were badly let down and badly served by the last government. And whoever won the election last year would have had to deal with this mess that we have inherited, and that is what we are seeking to do.
Sir David Davies.
In March of this year, it was widely reported the Secretary of State gave his word to Mairead Kelly, the sister of IRA murderer Patrick Kelly, that there would be an inquest on the Loughall incident. Is this remedial order a fulfilment of that promise? Because if so, it means 30 years on, the government is dragging veterans into court over an operation that stopped 8 heavily armed IRA murderers. Men who had already killed, men who are on their way to kill again, and with weapons that have been used in 40 previous murders. Let's be clear. By stopping this attack, those soldiers prevented the murder of many more innocent Northern Ireland citizens. So what justice is served by punishing those brave soldiers with a stressful and unnecessary process? The Liberal who spoke earlier described it as a persecution, punishing them for doing nothing more than their duty. Is this really what the Secretary of State intends?
The fact is that this government was elected on a commitment because there was a lot of opposition to the ending of inquests under the Legacy Act. There was, maybe not from him, but from a lot of other people in Northern Ireland. And the government came in committed to restore the inquests that had started and were stopped. And the reason that I said what I said is because Loughall, as I've already indicated to the Shadow Secretary of State, is one of those 9 cases. It is for the independent coronial system to take a decision about that. But one of the factors, of course, that coroners have to take into account is how they're going to deal with any sensitive information that is provided. And we know from other inquests that there have been a number of cases where the coroner said, well, I accept that if this information cannot see the light of day. They've examined the public interest immunity certificate and have reached the conclusion that I can't take the case any further. And in those circumstances, the sensible thing would be for cases to move into the Commission where sensitive information can be considered.
Lawrence Sullivan.
Deputy Speaker, I welcome the Secretary of State's commitment to new protections for veterans. Will he update the House on the discussions he and the MOD ministers have had with veterans and their representative groups about these measures?
Well, we have had many such discussions. My honourable and gallant friend and myself and the Defence Secretary, and the measures that I have announced will be contained in this bill and the other non-legislative measures are the result of those discussions, because we've listened very carefully to the concerns that veterans have expressed, and we've come forward with what we think is a fair, reasonable, balanced package of measures that will provide protection while also taking forward the responsibility we have to enable those families to find answers, including forces families.
Stuart Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm against the repealing of the Legacy Act, and I served in Northern Ireland, and I'm doing so in opposition now. I raised in government major concern and dishonour when none of the benches or the points the Minister has raised now didn't have the decency to come to this House and debate them. They let it go through, and it went on Hansard that actually very few people even bothered to come to the chamber to debate this when it was when we took it through government. But the 2 points I do have quickly are the support for veterans. You've spoken about the process they will have to go to. I want to know what support is available, as you have mentioned, and also fairer disclosure. When the terrorists didn't keep records, but the British Army did, how are you going to ensure fairer disclosure through that process?
Secretary of State, can I just remind members not to refer to you, as that means me. Secretary of State.
Well, I'm grateful to the honourable member for his point. Well, there is support available for veterans through the Ministry of Defence, and I know that the Armed Forces Minister is very, very committed to making sure that veterans get all the support they need, which is in part reflected in the package that we have announced. On disclosure, we are making a number of changes, amending the definition of sensitive information so it's not designated by virtue of the body that held it, and that's one of the reasons why the courts found the disclosure arrangements were not compatible with our commitments. The Secretary of State will have to conduct a balancing exercise on what should be disclosed. The Secretary of State will be required to give reasons for any decision not to disclose, to the extent that that doesn't risk harm to national security. And of course, any decision that the Secretary of State makes can be subject to judicial review.
Lewis Atkinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Secretary of State for his statement and also for the way which he and the Minister for Armed Forces have engaged on this matter in recent months. I have many constituent veterans in Sunderland Central who served with distinction in Operation Banner, and he rightly praises the professionalism and service of our armed forces in that. And I welcome therefore the protections he sets out today. Can I push him a little bit more on the continuing work with veterans groups, so that as these protections are being implemented, there will be a process of ongoing review to ensure that they provide effective protection from vexatious lawfare?
Well, I'm very happy to give my honourable friend that assurance, because we've made these commitments because we want them to work, and the government is determined to ensure that that is the case.
Swan.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And just to follow on from that assurance from the Secretary of State about those protections for veterans, because on the 19th of September he stood beside the Irish government when he made this announcement. Later that evening, the Taoiseach Simon Harris went on Irish media and clearly said that there was no added protections for veterans in the legacy deal. So can the Secretary of State give assurance to this House, is there protections for veterans in this legacy deal or not?
When the honourable gentleman sees the legislation, he will see those protections he will see that the protections that we have said will be backed by legislation are in the legislation. But in addition to that, the provision relating to cold calling and not requiring veterans to rehearse the historical context when it is possible for someone from the Ministry of Defence, for example, to do that, to assist both inquests and the Commission.
Peter Swallow.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As the Secretary of State knows, I'm a member of the Human Rights Committee, and we've been very engaged in this issue, not least because of our court's ruling the previous government's attempt to legislate on this issue was unlawful because it potentially would grant immunity, amongst others, to terrorists. That is no way to serve justice to families and victims. It's no way to serve justice to our veterans. So can the Secretary of State commit that the legislation that we are bringing forward will not grant immunity to terrorists? That's a simple request. It's remarkable that I have to ask it, but given the legislation that the previous government attempted to pass, I think it is important to have it on record.
Well, I'm very happy to give my honourable friend that assurance. The legislation was passed, it was never commenced, it was struck down by the courts, and the remedial order will remove it from the statute book because we don't agree with giving immunity to terrorists. We don't agree with the principle of immunity because we believe, I hope the whole House believes, in the rule of law.
Sir Julian Lewis.
I'm surprised no one has mentioned the letters of comfort that were given to the IRA and whether or not they still hold water. But let me go back to what the Secretary of State was saying about the possibility of IRA bosses like Jerry Adams claiming compensation on technical grounds that the wrong, in inverted commas, minister signed their internment papers. As I understand it, from what he said earlier, the remedial order that he is laying before Parliament will open up the possibility of people like that suing the government for compensation, which nevertheless, which the new legacy legislation that is bringing in will then rule out. And he referred to a possible gap between the new legislation coming into force and the remedial order opening the gap. Now, it's been suggested to me that the government is briefing the press that the remedial order will not actually be voted upon until the new Legacy Act has gone through Parliament. Is that his policy? And if not, what is his policy?
Well, the aim of the remedial order is to remove from the statute book provisions in the previous legislation that have been found to be incompatible with our obligations. I would just say on the letters of comfort, they did not offer immunity, and that's been quite clear from Lady Justice Hallett's review, what the Chief Constable and others have said. On the case of the interim custody orders, if I could just reassure the right honourable gentleman, the Supreme Court judgment was in 2020. The last government didn't know what to do about that. It was not a judgment the government expected. Didn't know how to try and deal with the question of potential compensation. In the end, two members of the other house put forward what are now sections 46 and 47. They were voted upon, but they were then subsequently found to be ineffective in achieving the objective when the court said they're incompatible. But what I've just told the House is that the new draft remedial order will not remove them from the statute book. So 46 and 47 will remain in place until such time as the new legislation I am introducing takes effect. Now, it's a flimsy defence because it's already been found by the courts to be ineffective, but it will remain in place, and it shows that I have listened to the representations that were made about 46 and 47 and its place in the remedial order. I'm now going to deal with the problem by legislation in the way I set it out.
Jim Allister.
Scores, if not hundreds, of people in Northern Ireland lost their lives because of the safe base and the haven that the Republic of Ireland offered their IRA murderers. That was where they had their arms dumps, that was where they had their training camps, and that was where they returned to for sanctuary, safe in the knowledge that extradition would invariably be refused. Yet it is with the government of that territory that the Secretary of State has chosen to co-design these proposals. He didn't co-design them with the innocent victims of terrorism. He chose to co-design them with the government of the territory that facilitated the victim makers. Why then should any innocent victim have any confidence in these proposals? Particularly as it still requires nothing meaningful from the Republic of Ireland. A tentative promise that, if necessary, there will be cooperation, but no apology for the Republic's role in facilitating terrorism for years. Did the Secretary of State even seek an apology publicly from the Republic of Ireland?
When I started Walton Goggins Goggle Glasses, I needed a website. Figuring out how to make one was pretty hard on the old noggin. But with GoDaddy Aero, I can just tell it what I want. And it uses AI to make a website so fast it pretty much blows my noggin. This is working. With a beautiful design that'll blow my customers' noggins. Which allowed me to focus my noggin on making more goggins to put on their noggins. Which were just metaphorically blown. Look like you know what you're doing at GoDaddy.com.
To deliver the aid. We were kind of handcuffed, and the private sector could not just support to support. So I think we need to really ramp up our appeals and bring the private sector at the table.
And that's really timely that you speak about that, Carla, because our next speaker is indeed going to speak about the reconstruction need for Gaza. I'd like to thank you very, very much for having come. This is a question for her, not on Gaza, please. I want to do a Gaza part. So is that on Gaza? But I would like to hear from UNDP because he's going to speak a lot more about funding. Carla, do you need to go or can you stay? Okay, but that's done. In this case, let's do this. We have online. You can stay on the podium. Yeah, sure, and Ricardo too. We have the privilege to have online the special representative of the administrator of UNDP for the Programme of Assistance to the Palestinian People, Yago Sillier, who I would like to welcome. And Yago is going to speak about reconstruction and funding. So, yes, I understand. But Carla is going to stay here. She's nicely waiting. And we will take the question on the economic issue and reconstruction and funding for Gaza just after Jaco's intervention. And then we will have Christian Cardon for ICRC, Ricardo, and maybe, I don't know if Tariq also will want to say something on the humanitarian side of the situation in Gaza. So, because Jaco needs to go afterwards. So, if Carla can stay, we will listen from Jaco, and then I'll take the question on the economic issues, reconstruction and funding, okay? Thank you very much for your patience. So, Jaco, thank you very much for being with us to brief the journalists here in Geneva. As I said, you are the UNDP special representative for the Programme of Assistance to the Palestinian People, and you would like to brief us on the issues related to the reconstruction needs of Gaza and funding. Please, go ahead.
Thank you very much also for the introduction, and thank you very much, colleagues. I'm speaking to you from Jerusalem, but just to indicate that over the last 2 months, I have traveled to Gaza on 2 occasions already. I was also scheduled to go into Gaza on Sunday. It's unfortunately being postponed, but I will be traveling there tomorrow also to further support our program on the ground. Let me maybe just first of all say that the destruction that you see in Gaza, obviously, as has been mentioned before, is devastating. It is very terrible to see it in person, to see families digging through rubble for their belongings, to see young children who are looking for water and food but should be in school on the streets is just shocking. To see once you travel and are in Gaza. However, in spite of this, the resilience of the people in Gaza is incredible, and also their determination to rebuild the Gaza Strip is really incredible in terms of their willingness and determination. We also, as UNDP, call on the need also for all parties to respect the just declared ceasefire. It's important also for the long-term stability and the recovery in Gaza. Let me maybe just give you a quick indication of the early recovery challenges faced in Gaza. I will just highlight the challenges around debris removal. For instance, if you look at the debris challenges and what needs to be done, it is comparable to building a 12-meter wall around Central Park. And if you fill that with debris, then that is the amount of debris that needs to be moved in Gaza. As UNDP, we've already removed about 81,000 tons. That is about 3,100 truckloads. The majority of the debris removal is at the moment to provide access to humanitarian actors so that they can provide the much needed aid and support to the people in Gaza, but we also help with hospitals and other social services that needs to be cleared of debris. We have reused about 13,200 tons of debris. We use crushing machines so that the debris can be reused for anything from road pavements, but also to providing flooring for some of the shelters being built in Gaza. Just to give you an estimate of the challenges that the reconstruction efforts will cost, it will the RDNA, which was jointly done by the UN, the European Union, and the World Bank, estimate that about $70 billion will be required for the reconstruction of Gaza. That means that also in the next 3 years, about $20 billion will be required. We also call on much needed access to provide also opportunities to address the reconstruction and early recovery efforts in Gaza. This includes also much needed heavy equipment that needs to help with the restoration and the repair of damages and the reconstruction efforts as well. UNDP has been on the ground from day one. We've continued to work and stay and deliver in Gaza. We are covering both the humanitarian to the early recovery to also the development areas. It's obviously a long road ahead, but we hope that with the support of UN partners and other international and national actors, that the recovery efforts can start as soon as possible. Let me leave it there and back and over to you.
Thank you very much.
We'll have to alert suppliers, coordinate shipments.
Already alerted, already coordinated.
Since when can we just scale up mid-cycle?
Since we brought in BDO.
People who know BDO.
Much. If I can ask the journalists, please, let's concentrate the questions on this, and then we will have, as I said, humanitarian colleagues speaking about the humanitarian situation. Lots of hands up, and I'll start with Jamie. Associated Press, Jakob.
Thank you, Mr. Childers. Thank you for coming back to see us. You just mentioned the RDNA. Could you clarify exactly when that time frame is? I'm looking on the internet as we speak, and I don't see that figure of 70 billion. How recent is that? When was that established? And how quickly can you start drumming up funds for that?
And Jamie, maybe you had also you also had a question for Carla, so before your hand. Ah, okay, then wait. Okay. No, let's keep it to that. Jakob, please.
Yeah, so just to mention, the interim RDNA was done in March, and that figure was 53 billion. Since then, the World Bank has done an updated assessment that has brought the figure to 70 billion. And that is what also the most recent pledge would be. Just to indicate actually that the United Nations, with the technical support of UNDP and the European Union and the World Bank, is also now updating the RDNA with the physical damage, which is what will be needed. So also to provide a more comprehensive recovery plan and framework for the challenges in Gaza.
Thank you very much, Emma. Reuters.
Yes, I was just wondering, can you say how many million tons there are of rubble in Gaza right now? And does that include Gaza City? There's been a lot of recent demolitions. Can you say how much extra rubble that has generated? And next steps for pledging, for getting donors and states on board. Thank you.
Yeah, so the estimated damage and rubble throughout the whole of Gaza is in the region of 55 million tons. Another way to put it, apart from the example from Central Park that I mentioned, is also equal to 13 pyramids in Giza. That is the amount and size of the challenge that needs to be filled. Obviously, a big part of that is now in Gaza City. There has been incredible destruction and and many houses have been destroyed. There is about 425 housing units that have been either fully destroyed or damaged. So that also gives you an indication of the size and the challenge that needs to occur as well. There are also a number of new, as we mentioned, in terms of the funding requests. It is great to see, as was mentioned previously by my UNICEF colleagues, donors also stepping up and making a commitment to also help both with the humanitarian but also the early recovery efforts in Gaza.
Agnes Pedrero, AFP.
Yes, thank you. Agnès Pedro from Agence France Presse in Geneva. A question on the work that you will be doing with the rebels. Do you expect to find bodies in those rebels, and what is the procedure in those cases? Who is in charge of taking care of the bodies and to identify them? If you could give some indications about all that part of the work. Thank you. Or other agencies.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is a reality and a very sad situation of the work that we're doing also in rubble removal. We have actually come across such incidents already where 3 bodies were found in the process of removing some of the rubble. The UN and the debris removal cluster has very strict, also based on international standard policies and procedures and SOPs for how to deal with such incidents. I can maybe share with you that what we first did is calling the civil defense unit just to mark off the area. Then the ICRC are called in to help with identification of the remains, as well as WHO, of how to take care of those remains. And then obviously there are also religious considerations that we have to do for these types of bodies and for burial. So those are also taken into consideration and addressed during this very difficult period. Unfortunately, we anticipate that many more bodies will be discovered in this process of rubble removal.
Indeed. And we will hear also from ICRC later on. Agnes, you have a follow-up?
Yes, you mentioned that you already have found 3 bodies. Could you let us know since when? When do you have begun your work? Thank you.
Yeah, we started actually with rubble removal already in 2012 in Gaza, but we have been active since the war started on the 7th of October, since January 2025. We have done the rubble removal. The bodies were discovered actually in a mosque about 2 months ago. So that's where they were discovered during the initial phases of providing spaces and open spaces also for shelter opportunities.
Christian Ulrich, German news agent.
Good morning. Thank you. Can you tell us a bit about your discussions with the Israeli authorities? Do you have the go-ahead to go in? Do you have the go-ahead to bring heavy equipment? When do you expect this work to start? And on the money side, do you have any commitments, firm commitments towards this sum of $70 billion yet?
Customize your own holiday card or shop millions of products designed by our community of creators. Zazzle offers high-quality